Dark Discoveries is a podcast that dives into the darker corners of history, mystery, and the downright bizarre. We discuss real events that may include graphic details, adult themes, and strong language. Not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is strongly advised.
We're here to inform, entertain, and maybe make you laugh nervous in public, but never to glorify the criminals or make light of their victims. Our research is thorough, but hey, we're not perfect.
We don't claim to be historians, so if we get something slightly off, blame Jimbo. All opinions are our own, and sometimes even those are questionable.
I've had the impression from some of the things I've read that your mother ran a pretty taut ship. And
She sure did.
She was just as apt to give you a slap across the mouth if you got out of line as she was to say, don't blow your nose.
She held things under control, and she brought us up the way she believed was right. And out of all of the problems that we had, I think that when you look back, she kept us on the right road.
Was she the one that suggested that you shouldn't drink and you shouldn't smoke? I mean, is this...
No, never suggested. I just never I never discussed it. In fact, my mother never drank, neither one of my sisters or my brother.
Well, I knew you didn't smoke and you didn't drink, and I just wondered if this was a carryover.
My
back
mother
to that
never
day.
drank nor smoked. My brother smokes but don't drink. Neither of my sisters either smoke nor drink.
Jim, if you don't smoke and you don't drink, and you don't play around at golf, what do you do for entertainment?
Right here, work.
This is entertainment? 7
days a week, I have more fun here working than anybody can have on a golf course or any sport you can name. Every minute here, something new, something keeps you alert, because you're competing with the best brains in the United States.
With this kind of entertainment, how many days a year do you get at home?
I get home now, since I've been into Washington, on average once a month. I try to get home at least one weekend a month.
Jimmy, one reporter who took a very long look at Hoffa suggested that in a choice between power and money, you'd always choose power. Was he right?
Not for myself, I would not. I don't need any additional power than I have. But if it came a question of power as against money, certainly I would select power, because out of having additional power, it gives us the ability to get for our members additional economic gains. Nobody in this country respects what's weak. You believe me. If you see a beggar on a corner with his hat in his hand, nobody respects him. Dress the same man up. Give him an air of dignity, and he can command respect. The same thing applies to this union. If we lived in a basement instead of this magnificent building here, and we were broke and had no money instead of the money we have today, employers would be prone to fight us. But because we are financially solid, because we do have an organization that is equipped to handle any situation that comes in front of us, we're successful in getting from the employers what our members want and need without strikes.
Welcome back to Dark Discoveries. I'm your host, Jimbo.
And I'm Dustin.
Dustin, on this episode of Dark Discoveries, we dive into the early life of Jimmy Hoffa, tracing the rise of one of the most powerful and controversial labor leaders in American history. He was the face of American labor, a man who fought for the working class and befriended the underworld. He was loved by millions, feared by many more, and eventually vanished into thin air. But before Jimmy Hoffa became a national figure, before the Teamsters, the mob ties, and the mystery, he was just a boy from Indiana with a fire in his gut and a hatred for injustice.
James Riddle Hoffa was born February 14th, 1913, in Brazil, Indiana. Valentine's Day, baby.
Love is in the air.
He probably didn't get no love. Like, well, you either get roses and chocolate or he gets a birthday gift. Also, fun fact, Brazil, Indiana is the home of Orville Redenbacher. You've probably had his popcorn.
I love his popcorn.
Brazil, Indiana, which I didn't know, was a small coal town where soot covered everything. Everything was black. Life was hard. His parents, John and Viola Hoffa, were working class people. His father was a coal miner. His mother was a homemaker. Jimmy's early years were shaped by loss. When he was just 7, his father died of lung disease, probably black lung. His mother moved with his family to Detroit, seeking better opportunities. Detroit, Michigan at the time was booming and on the rise in the auto industry. But for poor families like Hoffa's, the American dream was just out of reach. Jimmy left school in the 9th grade to help support his family. He worked in a grocery store and various warehouses, basically any job he could find. But he had a keen mind, and even as a teenager, he noticed the imbalance. Workers were expendable, bosses were untouchable.
Kind of like today, huh?
Ain't a thing changed. He hated injustice, and he wasn't afraid to speak up. In a quote, he said, "You can treat people like that and expect them not to fight back.
You can't.
You can't."
Right.
He has that in a hard to read font.
At the age of 18, Jimmy got a job at Kroger's warehouse in Detroit. For those of you that are not familiar from the Kroger or not in the Midwest, it is a grocery chain, kind of like Publix, Winn-Dixie, Piggly Wiggly, Marsh, if you still have them.
Now, Marsh went out of business because that's where my family worked. Right. We didn't shop at Kroger.
But let's go Krogering. You remember those commercials and the jingles?
We didn't have Kroger's in Muncie because Muncie was a Marsh town.
Wow.
And you went to Marsh. I mean, that's what paid the bills for some of the family members. So you did not go. If my aunt went to Walmart, she had to hide the bags. That's a true story. So
like I said, he got a job at a Kroger warehouse. He was unloading refrigerated boxcars of strawberries. I wonder if he ever took a couple out and gnawed on.
Of course they did.
Of course they did. But it was grueling work. I mean, you're talking 10 to 12-hour days, 6 days a week with no job security and no overtime pay. His wage, a whopping 32 cents an hour. Dustin, what was your starting wage when you first got a job? Do you remember?
Legal?
Legal.
Like paying taxes or the first job I worked? Because the first job I had was washing cars. We got paid 25 cents a car. I think the boss got paid 50 cents or $1 a car. They were supposed to break it up and, trickle down economics. Didn't work.
Okay, Hoffa, I'm talking about your real job.
And then the first job I had that I actually had a paycheck with taxes taken out was $7.50 an hour.
Well, Dustin, my first job was at Burger King, was making the minimum wage of $4.60 an hour. We've come a long way.
Definitely come a long way.
But not nearly far enough.
I've looked at some of the old pay stubs that my great-grandfather had from the coal mines.
Isn't it crazy?
And it was good money, but it was nothing for what you did and getting, pretty sure he died of black lung. It's ridiculous what they work for and they risk their lives to do just to make a company rich because they lived in the company, in their houses. They shopped in the company stores. They got paid in company money. Script. It's ridiculous that in that, even up to the 80s and 90s, places were still paying in script. Mm-hmm. Not U.S. legal tender, but money that you could not, you're spending more money than you're making, paying these people back.
Monopoly
making your kids go into the mines to survive. It was a different time back then.
Yep.
I'm off my tangent now. So in 1932,
hang on.
Oh, come on.
But something about Hoffa made him stand out. He was charismatic, he was persuasive, and he was brave.
You were supposed to say that before you went on your tangent.
Well, I would, but you interrupted with your long tangents. So.
Trust me, we go all around the world with my tangents. In 1932, during the Great Depression, Hoffa led his first labor action, a wildcat strike at the warehouse. Management had been pushing workers harder and paying them less. Enough was enough. One day, Hoffa had convinced the other dock workers to stop unloading. the foreman yelling in the background at them to get back to work. Young Jimmy stood firm, handed the foreman a list of demands for him and his fellow co-workers. Of course, Hoffa was first. With the produce starting to spoil on the docks, the demands were soon met. Jimmy and his co-workers were soon known as the Strawberry Boys.
But Dustin, what you failed to realize is, do you know what your sister and her group was known as? The Ginger Girls. The Ginger Girls. So you had the Strawberry Boys and the Ginger Girls.
Hey, leave my sister out of this, okay? Only I can make fun of her. She still hasn't heard it, so it's okay, because she will probably kill me. It wasn't a sanctioned strike, but it was risky. Hoffa organized it so effectively that within days, Kroger caved. Workers got better wages and hours. Hoffa just didn't win the fight. He earned loyalty. And from that moment on, Jimmy Hoffa was a labor leader. This small victory put Hoffa on the radar of the local union, the Teamsters.
Enter the union, the Teamsters. Pretty big outfit. So the International Brotherhood of Teamsters was founded in 1903 to represent drivers and warehouse workers. By the 1930s, it had become one of the most powerful unions in America, but it was also fractured and corrupt, and the leadership was often more concerned with backroom deals than workers' rights. That's where Hoffa came in. In 1934, at just 21 years old, Hoffa joined Teamsters Local 299 in Detroit. He quickly became a business agent and proved he had a gift, not just for organizing, but for strategizing, negotiating, and when necessary, intimidating. He didn't follow the rules. Hoffa rewrote them. He believed in the end justifies the means. If it meant striking deals with shady figures to get better contract for his members, so be it. If it meant standing toe-to-toe with corporate lawyers or street thugs, Hoffa never backed down. Hoffa, quote, says, "I've got one thing in mind, my members. I'll do whatever it takes to protect them."
The 1930s and 40s was a chaotic time, especially for organized labor. The mob was watching. In cities like Chicago, Detroit, and New York, the mafia had already infiltrated many unions. The Teamsters were no exception. And while there's debate about when exactly Hoffa began working with organized crime, most historians agree that it was by the late 1930s. He was already building relationships with key mob figures. Not because he was greedy, probably because he was greedy, but because he was pragmatic. The mob offered muscle, influence, and access to industries that refused to cooperate. Hoffa wasn't interested in being clean. He was interested in winning.
Right. So throughout the 1940s and the 1950s, Hoffa climbed the Teamsters ranks pretty quickly. His biggest achievement, he unionized the trucking industry nationwide. And I'm telling you, that's a feat. Nationwide. I mean, you didn't have Facebook
coast to coast
and on all that stuff back then. I mean, word of mouth, the USPS.
He was probably putting more miles than Ray Kroc did trying to sell milkshake machines.
It's true. He used a strategy called master contracts. Instead of negotiating with each company individually, he forced them all to sign the same contract, ensuring uniform pay and benefits for all workers. Pretty smart, if I'm going to say.
For the time. Now it's totally a different ballgame, but back then...
Well, even now, I'm part of the UAW, and, you know, the Ford, Chrysler, and Stellantis or whatever, they all, when they go into contract negotiatings now, they take one at a time. They take Ford.
Yep.
And what they do is, okay, we'll just say Ford. They get in there and they get what they can. That sets the tone for when they go to negotiate with Chrysler or whoever's next. They get on there and then it trickles down. It works both ways.
Back then it was more bargaining power.
But back there it's like, hey, you do this.
It's like, hey, we got them this, so you're going to do this.
So we're going to shut down the entire thing because I'm here for all my Teamsters, not just for this one local at 299 in Detroit or whatever.
It was a good gesture to start with.
Right. So in 1946, Hoffa had a coming out party, baby. He had the 1946 strike. which led a massive Teamster strike. I mean, as you can imagine. The strike wasn't just a local inconvenience. It rocked the nation's freight and trucking industry to the core. Hoffa's leadership here earned him a reputation as a union boss who gets results. He rallied tens of thousands of workers, secured better wages, and showed the world he was a force to be reckoned with.
Could you imagine trying to cross that picket line back then?
Absolutely not. Wouldn't do it.
You know it had to be mobbed up at the time, too.
Oh, yeah.
And we kind of alluded a little bit. Hoffa wasn't afraid to fight.
Oh, no.
So, you know, them guys were, if you don't knock the shit out of these guys, I'm going to do it to you. So they're going to get their results pretty quick.
But you got to remember, by doing this, it puts him on the radio, both of the labor movement's allies, but also its enemies.
Oh, yeah.
So in 1952, Hoffa became vice president of the Teamsters, and by 1957, following a corruption scandal that ousted President Dave Beck, Jimmy Hoffa became president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, the most powerful labor union in the United States.
There is no question in my mind, I don't believe any question in anybody's mind in the Teamsters Union, except the newspaper people who are not members of the Teamsters, that I am the elected president of the Teamsters Union, and there has been no opposition to my leadership.
Mr. Hoffa, do you expect to ask for a resolution backing your leadership at this meeting?
There is no reason to have any such resolution because there is no dissension between the board members and myself as general president.
Have you seen any indications of a revolt, sir, in the union at all?
You know, because you people have tried to stir one up by your propaganda, that there is no revolt in the Teamsters Union, and there will be no revolt.
During this period, Hoffa expanded his network across the country. He promoted loyalists to key union positions, and he tightened his grips on the Teamsters' political and financial machine. He now controlled over 1.5 million members and billions of dollars in pension fund. He had reached the top. But when you get to the top, that power has a price. Jimmy Hoffa's early life was forged in fire, loss, labor, and loyalty. He rose from the working class not just to lead it, but to shape its destiny. Whether hero or villain, one thing is certain: Jimmy Hoffa never backed down.
He has seized the records of almost every joint council in this country of any importance, spent months in the international headquarters investigating our books, and cannot be convinced, because he doesn't want to and because of his desire to carry on this fight at the government's expense and his own vendetta, that the records that we file with the government are bona fide, established, accredited records by receipts, vouchers, and checks. No other union in the United States is receiving the same treatment. Now, there's 179 international unions. And if there isn't a vendetta, why is there over 3,000 people at the government's expense and the taxpayers' expense investigating the Teamsters Union? Repeatedly. Not once, but repeatedly.
Why would the Attorney General do that?
In my opinion, he is never in his life ran up against a situation he couldn't dominate, that he couldn't control, and have his way. He's just a spoiled young millionaire that never had to go out and find a way to live by his own efforts, and he cannot understand resistance to what he wants. And if you look around this country, he has made almost all of the international unions conform to what he wants. We don't intend to do that. We're going to carry out what our membership wants, within keeping of the law, whether Bobby Kennedy likes it or not.
Wow. He really liked the Kennedy family. So
We're going to talk about that here in a little bit.
So here's where things start to get murky, but fascinating. The Teamsters pension fund was massive. It was probably in the billions in the 1950s.
Yeah, imagine what that would be
Yeah,
today.
like a new car was like, what, $1,500 back then? Instead of playing it safe with the pension fund, Hoffa would take risks. It was often used to bankroll shady operations like casinos, maybe some mob-ran construction companies, or some other businesses linked to them. Hoffa knew about this. He wasn't a naive pawn. He was a willing participant. He needed the mafia's muscle to maintain order in the Union and keep his rivals in line. But that relationship came with consequences. The FBI and the Kennedy administration started zeroing in on Hoffa and the Teamsters' corruption, racketeering, bribery, the whole works. Kind of like a pizza. All the stuff you don't want's on the works.
Especially
Peppers,
anchovies.
bell peppers, all that stuff you don't want to eat.
Pineapple.
Pineapple's not bad on pizza.
Doesn't go on pizza.
There's no rules when it comes to pizza. I don't care. Hoffa becomes the Teamsters president in 1957 after Dave Beck is forced out after a scandal. Hoffa's immediate efforts is to solidify his control over the union and expand its power. The Teamsters' vast influence, over 2 million members, from truckers to warehouse workers. Hoffa's hands-on leadership, frequently visiting local offices, settling disputes, centralizing the control. Like I said, you heard it earlier, he worked 7 days a week. 1 weekend a month he was at home, the rest of the time he was out working.
What kind of family life is that?
That's why we're not talking about his family, because did he really have one?
Right.
That's a great loving relationship there. Under Hoffa, the Teamster secured massive contracts and grew richer. The shadow of corruption grew too. Hoffa's reign was marked by allegations of jury tampering, bribery, and intimidation. Here's a quote from one of Jimmy Hoffa's speeches on labor power. If you've got a business in America, the Teamsters are going to know about it. We'll fight for the fair wages. We'll fight for respect.
And now, what he didn't expect was the Kennedys. Enter the Kennedys, JFK and RFK.
Dun, dun, dun.
So here's a little overview before we get into the real bitter blood rival that they had. So the 1960 presidential election, John F. Kennedy rises with Robert F. Kennedy as his hard-hitting campaign manager. RFK becomes Attorney General, a position he uses to wage war on organized crime and the Teamsters. RFK's public vow to bring down Jimmy Hoffa, and of course, tension boils over during some Senate hearings where their infamous rivalry takes shape. They absolutely hated each other. Not politically, not personally, but personally. Hoffa once said of RFK, he is a spoiled brat. RFK called Hoffa the most dangerous man in America.
And Kennedy said something to me, and I said to him, listen, punk, you are a complete liar, and I'm tired of your nonsense, and I don't want to hear about it again. Now you just shut up. Don't cause me no more trouble. The thing blows up. Got charges against me, obstructions and everything else. So they adjourned because that rascally adjourned, and I'm standing right here. I see Kennedy get up and come literally running around the table, across to me, and I get myself ready. He's going to come. I'm ready to go. So he comes running up to me and says, I have a headache. You give me a headache. And I said, Bobby, the trouble with you got to get a psychiatrist. Lay on the couch for 2 or 3 hours. You're sick. The man just trembled, and all the reporters laughed and took pictures. Well, that was the fight. Then he came over to the international office, and he started the same thing about books and records, and he told him, get out of here, keep going. And we fought him all the way down the line, and we beat him right into the ground. He couldn't go no place. When our boys would come in, they all took the fifth. Everyone took the fifth. And they say to him, "No, Jimmy Hoffa?" 5. So now he figures out that to protect myself so I won't get perjury, everybody now must take the fifth, so they can't compare their testimony against mine. This was his theory. But everybody held still. And he got no place. 5 contempt charges against me, obstruction of justice, everything. Nothing came out of it. And then he decided he was going to make a different approach, and he did. And this takes quite a while. I don't want to take your time, but I'll try to shorten it up. He goes to our PR guy, Eddie Shakers. Gets Eddie to invite me to Eddie's house with him, so we can have an off-the-record discussion. I said, Eddie, what do I want to meet with him for? So we have a big roundtable discussion, and it's agreed I should go to Eddie's house and meet him. So I do. It's snowing outside. I was sitting in front of a fireplace. This guy's got his sleeves rolled up. He really thought it was something, physically. And I'm listening to him talking. He's rambling around and telling me about the line, this hoodlum and that hoodlum and this gangster and that gangster. And he liked to talk about gangsters. Man, he was all aflame when he talked about gangsters and funny names. And I said, "You're sick, for Christ's sake, leave me alone." He said, "Well, you know something? You think you're a tough guy?" I said, "No, I don't think I'm a tough guy. What are you talking about?" He said, "I can beat you at arm wrestling." I said, "No, what the hell are you talking? You crazy or something? I didn't come here to arm wrestle with you." We get into another little wrangle, but whether I should arm wrestle. And Eddie Schaefer winked at me and said, "Get rid of the arguments." All right, roll up my sleeve, take off my coat, flip him over. Then make him head. So then we have dinner. He leaves. When I come back to the hotel, they got 20 FBI guys or 45 FBI guys surrounding the hotel. When I walk in the lobby, they grab me, boom, boom, boom.
They all wanted to arm wrestle?
So I get mad at them, and fortunately I had a meeting in that same hotel. I had about 100 guys in the lobby, and I said, "Listen, wait a minute. You want to have trouble with me, you could have it. Because I got 100 guys here, we'll take you apart and put you back together again. I'm going upstairs, make a phone call to my lawyer, and I'll go with you, but don't hustle me and don't push me." So a guy named Bell was in charge, he backed off. I called Ed, told Ed I was going down to the station, he better come down and get me out. I come down to the prison, locked me into a cell. Who appears on the scene? Bobby Kennedy and his wife. And he's got a short sleeve jacket on, and he's got a turtleneck deal, And this is now about 11 o'clock. "I finally got you, holy Jesus." He goes into such a deal, and I get mad.
August 3rd, 1957, in a blistering Senate hearing, the young chief counsel leans into the microphone. "Mr. Hoffa," he says, "did you or did you not authorize the intimidation of your own membership?" The stocky Union Titan smirks, tilts his head, and fires back. "Counselor, I don't intimidate anybody. At least of all, my drivers." Reports scribble, cameras click, and two futures lock horns. One is Robert Francis Kennedy, 31 years old and spoiling for a righteous fight. The other is James Riddle Hoffa, 44, king of the Teamsters, and by his own measure, the best friend the working man ever had. This is their combustible rivalry, a crusade born of ambition, power, vengeance, and a nation's fear of who will rally America's roads, or who really ran.
The Senate Labor Rackets Committee, headed by Senator McClellan, with Bobby Kennedy as its counsel and Barry Goldwater as a fellow member. He introduced a bill to correct abuses of big business and big labor. Opposing the bill was Jimmy Hoffa, leader of the Teamsters Union.
I would be very happy to have our legal counsel here, our legislative representative here, assisting me in spending as much time as necessary to acquaint the American people with the fact that this is a strike-breaking, union-busting bill, in my opinion.
Mr. Hoffa, this bill is not a strike-breaking, union-busting bill. You're the best argument I know for it. Your testimony here this afternoon, your complete indifference to the fact that numerous people who hold responsible positions in your union come before this committee and take the Fifth Amendment because an honest answer might tend to incriminate them. Your complete indifference to it, I think, makes this bill essential.
So there you have, Kennedy and Hoffa going at each other, both with their accents. I was going to make Dustin read the quotes with the accents of Hoffa and the accents of Kennedy, but I figured we'd
just imagine Mayor Quimby's voice from The Simpsons and you'll be okay. Just use that in your head.
But these two powerhouses, they both kind of had parallel ascents into their power. So to understand this feud, we trace two paths that never should have crossed. Jimmy Hoffa grew up poor in Brazil, Indiana, hauling groceries at the age of 9, quitting school at the age of 14, and discovering that labor solidarity, if wielded like a blackjack, could raise wages overnight. By the early 1950s, his Teamsters were the fastest growing union in the Western Hemisphere, 1 million members strong, with influence stretching from Miami docks to Seattle docksides, and tentacles prosecutors whispered straight into the mafia's 5 famous families.
2,000 miles east in New England, wealthy Robert Bobby Kennedy sharpened his idealism at Harvard and then the Navy. Then apprenticed in congressional investigations. His moral compass was rigid, some said brittle, but always pointing towards corruption like iron true north. When the Senate's McClellan Committee convened in 1957 to examine union crime, Bobby seized the council's chair. He was 20-something, untested, yet convinced labor racketeering threatened democracy itself.
If Hoffa embodied raw, backslapping street power, Bobby personified patrician reform. They shared ambition and ferocious loyalty to their tribes, but from the moment Hoffa learned the committee's agenda, Teamsters front and center, he saw Bobby as a silver spoon meddler. Bobby, smelling smoke, decided Hoffa was the fire.
Television loved the conflict. The hearings delivered a spectacle. Over 208 days of testimonies. Bobby grilled mobsters, embezzlers, bagmen, yet the nation tuned in for Hoffa's showdown. Viewers saw sweat beading on the senator's brows. They saw Hoffa, his sideways grin. Heard Bobby hammered. Do you deny ordering violence against non-union drivers? Hoffa paired. I deny any such nonsense, counselor. Their accents, Hoffa's Midwestern, Bobby's clipped Bostonian, clashed like cymbals.
Attorney General Robert Kennedy paints a grim picture of the rise of lawlessness under the Cosa Nostra, or Mafia. This he describes as the government of organized gambling, narcotics peddling, extortion, racketeering, and controlling of certain trade unions.
Do you have any evidence of the $20,000 in cash that you put into the business?
I don't need any evidence. You'll take my word for it, as the Internal Revenue has.
Do you have any record of it?
No.
Would you tell us where you got the cash?
I accumulated it.
From your salary?
From whatever investments I had, or salary, or income, but it was accumulated.
Did any of this come out of the winnings that Mr. Brennan made at the racetrack?
Very easily it could have.
Could I ask you whether Mr. Brennan is still winning at the track?
I believe he is. I hope we have luck this year. We haven't finished yet.
How much have you turned over to him to gamble?
So far this year, nothing. You kept me too busy.
How much has he won for you?
Behind the scenes, staffers found slashed tires, anonymous death threats, and wiretap transcripts hinting at Hoffa's nightly calls to the Detroit mob. Bobby pressed for contempt citations. Hoffa counterattacked with private detectives, digging into Kennedy's scandals. Maybe something on the Partridge. Joe Kennedy? Huh. Patriarch, Partridge. There's a couple words I'm always going to mess up.
Not the Partridge family, but the patriarch.
That's what I meant. Got it right the first time we did this, not the second. But nothing surfaced. But paranoia did grow. Reports whispered that Hoffa vowed, I'll break that kid. Bobby told his friends, we will put him in jail or drive him out of labor. They were young enough to believe destiny had cleared the ring just for the two of them, like heavyweight boxers.
But what you fail to realize is John F. Kennedy wins the presidency by a whisker in 1960. And one of his first announcements shocks Washington. Robert will be Attorney General. If Hoffa didn't like him before, he's really not going to like him now. Some claim nepotism. Others call it an artillery deployment. Either way, Bobby inherits the immense machinery of the Justice Department and promptly creates the Get Hoffa Squad, a hand-picked strike force of 17 prosecutors and 35 FBI agents who live, breathe, and dream Hoffa.
So this turns into a pissing contest.
Oh, he's coming full for it. He made it his life
and
mission.
Kennedy's got a pool to deal with.
Yep.
Let's go ahead and wage war on those people who put us in power, the mafia. I hope that was a good Bostonian accent. If not, I'm sorry.
They pour over pension-funded ledgers, flip disgruntled Teamsters, and run wiretaps so aggressively that decades later, courts will question the legality. Hoffa responds with bravado, touring local halls proclaiming, "They hate me because I fight for you." At rallies, he jabs, "The Kennedys never missed a mill. What do they know about labor?" And what's funny is, sure, were the Kennedys wiretapping stuff and all that, but guess what? Hoffa and them were doing it too, because back then, the wiretapping and all that, there was no rules or regulations for that. So
there probably was, but they weren't going to pay it.
No, neither one of them really.
When you operate on both sides, Kennedy and Hoffa, when you kind of operate outside the law, you don't really care.
Right. So in private, though, he fortifies alliances with Chicago's Tony Accardo, New Jersey's Anthony Provenzano, and Florida's Santo Trafficante, each rumored to profit from Teamster loans. Remember those names. You will hear some of those again. If the Kennedys bring the law, Hoffa will bring an army no statute recognizes.
The battle in the courtroom rages. 2 indictments defined the conflict's climax. The first charges Hoffa with jury tampering in Tennessee. Prosecutors present secret recordings. Hoffa allegedly promised thousands for a non-guilty vote. Hoffa's lawyers cry entrapment. Spectators watch Bobby, seated behind the bar, his expression like flint. After 6 weeks, a guilty verdict lands. 8 years. The second trial erupts in Chicago just months later. Pension fund fraud. This time, Hoffa stands accused of funneling millions to Las Vegas casinos controlled by mobsters. Former ally Edward Grady Parton, or Perton, however you want to say it. Who knows how you want to say his name? Fear, gripping his testimony, tells jurors that Hoffa asked him to stash payoffs. Hoffa's glare could cut steel. In March 1964, the jury convicts again. 5 more years. For Bobby, the victories feel euphoric. Public opinion splits. Some cheer the cleanup, others sense the government is overreaching. Hoffa's facing 13 years. He still orchestrates union politics from his Washington hotel suite, vowing appeals all the way to the Supreme Court.
Meanwhile, tragedy shadows the Kennedys. It's November 1963. JFK is assassinated in Dallas. Bobby's grief births a deeper social mission, and he leaves the Johnson cabinet, embarked on his own presidential run in 1968, only to be gunned down at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. Hoffa is locked up when he hears the news. Guards recall him nodding grimly, offering no comment. And here, I want you guys to realize how passionately he disliked the Kennedys. So here's an audio clip of him about why he didn't lower the flags half-mast when JFK was assassinated.
It's a story, though, that is unpleasant, that you refused to have the flag lowered to half-mast when John F. Kennedy was killed.
Correct.
You hated all the Kennedys.
No, that isn't correct. I didn't feel that he deserved, but I had witness of him both as a senator and as a president, that we should lower the flag of our building for a man that I did not have a respect for. The office I have a respect for, him I had no respect for. And I did instruct them not to send our people home and not to lower the flag. And I would do it again tomorrow if it had to happen.
In a poetic twist, each man's specter haunts the other's legend. Kennedy is remembered as an empathetic reformer martyred before fruition. Yet some scholars argue his relentless focus on Hoffa skewed the Department of Justice's priorities and tested civil liberties boundaries. Hoffa, once the voice of the blue-collared worker, might now survive in folklore, equal parts folk hero and underworld casualty. The war reshaped labor oversights. In 1959, the Landrum-Griffin Act tightened union finances. The Department of Justice broadened organized crime prosecutions, and even televised committee henceforth chased that cracking energy of Bobby squaring off against Jimmy. We followed two meteors blazing through the mid-century America, colliding until both burned out. One in the Los Angeles kitchen pantry, the other somewhere in the shadows of suburban Detroit. The question they left behind about power, justice, the thin line between crusades and vendetta, still echo whenever a politician vows to clean house or a working man wonders who really guards his pension.
Right, but now we're going to talk about the legal onslaught that Hoffa faced.
Thank God Kennedy and Hoffa were not the thin blue line between good and evil.
Right.
Man.
So the Kennedy administration was not about to let Hoffa run wild and do whatever he wanted. In the early 1960s, the federal government piled on the investigations. So we're going to take a moment and we're going to zoom in on the final days before Hoffa was arrested. So Hoffa was accused of jury tampering, trying to influence the outcome of his own trial by intimidating jurors.
Huh. Who's that sound like?
This was serious business. The government claimed he was using his mob connections and the union influence to get out of trouble. Hoffa was indicted on multiple charges: bribery, fraud, and jury tampering. Hoffa's alleged ties to the mafia comes into focus, especially with figures like Tony Provenzano and Carlos Marcello. His trial became a spectacle, kind of like probably the O.J. Simpson trial.
At that time, it was probably up there with I was trying to refer to Al Capone.
Right. Hoffa was defiant and unrepentant, often taunting prosecutors and the FBI, but in the end, justice caught up with him. After a lengthy legal battle at the 1962 and 1964 trials, one ends in mistrial and the other ends in a conviction. Hoffa was convicted and sentenced to 13 years in prison. It was a shocking fall for a man who once seemed untouchable. But guess what? His story wasn't over yet.
Hoffa was convicted in 1964, not because the Kennedys had a vendetta, so they say, but because the government had finally got all the goods. Because they were corrupt too, let's be honest. Jimmy Hoffa began his prison sentence in 1967, serving time at the federal penitentiary in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. But this wasn't some cushy setup, not like federal prison today. Federal prisons back then were tough. Hoffa's life was anything but easy. Even in prison, Hoffa never lost his swagger or his hunger for power. He continued to exert influences over the Teamsters from behind bars. His allies kept the union machinery running, and Hoffa himself worked tirelessly to maintain control. While in prison, Hoffa's mind was on one thing: getting out and reclaiming his throne. The Teamsters were huge. The power was unbelievable. Not just union power, but political and financial power. They controlled billions of dollars in assets. Hoffa wasn't going to let that go without a fight. He petitioned for early release and worked to secure communications of his sentence. Rumors swirled about deals being made behind closed doors involving powerful political figures, union officials, and even mob bosses.
That's a commutation, not communications there, Dustin. He wanted to get his sentence.
See, that's what happens when I don't write this and you do.
He wanted to get his sentence reduced, not talk about it.
He was trying to get a pardon is what he was doing. And in 1971, Richard Nixon commuted.
Hey!
That's because you put more stuff on the end of the other one. That's why. Tation versus commuted. Hoffa's sentence, cutting his prison time drastically. Within 5 years, Hoffa walked out a free man. But there was one catch, and it was a big one.
Mm-hmm.
He was legally barred from participating in any union activities until 1980.
Do you think that stops him?
Hell no, it didn't. I'm just trying to figure out why, before he went to prison, he didn't find a way to pull a little funny mustache guy and make him like the dictator where he could never be overthrown.
Because
they still had, I think, elections in Germany then, but he would.
You got to remember,
eliminate.
You got to remember, in a union, the people or your delegates elect the president.
Yeah, but his ego was so big. I'm surprised. Maybe he did try it, but
good.
Like you'd have thought he would have really pushed. Like, I made all of you. I'm doing this. What are you going to do to me?
I just want to know how he kept it going from behind bars. Did people come see him? Because, nobody cared if you don't.
Letters take too long.
Right.
And I'm sure even back then, your phone calls had to be, they weren't recorded probably.
Well,
but they were being listened into.
Right. So there's a quote from Hoffa's memoir, quote, "I never agreed to be silenced. They can try, but I'll fight." And fight does he do. So now enter Nixon, the mob, and of course his return attempt of trying to gain control of the Teamsters. Hoffa is released, immediately challenges his successor. So he didn't even listen to his parole thing. Like, don't.
No,
be in there.
just like Germany going into World War II, you cannot have an Air Force.
I bet.
What are you going to do? I'm going to bring back my military and my Air Force.
I bet as soon as he walked out of the thing, the very first thing he did was like, "Hey, drive me to a reporter. I need to make a statement, or drive me to the local union hall. I'm going to put in my bid to be the president."
And I think he really thought that Fitzsimmons was just going to step over and say, "Here you go."
Right.
In
because
his mind,
were friends at one time.
They were, but in his mind, I don't think he ever fathomed that he would not be running the Teamsters.
So what you got to remember is now that Hoffa is out of the way, right? Who did Hoffa deal with? The mob. Now that Hoffa's out of the way and Fitzsimmons taking over, he's kind of got a little comfy in there with the mob.
And he's doing it probably a little bit more low key.
Right. And the mob likes that. Keep us out of the spotlight.
And he's liking the power. He likes that. He likes that feeling.
So Fitzsimmons, he's cozy with Nixon and he's also cozy with the mob. And he wants Hoffa, hey, just take your money and retire.
Food for thought. What's that say about Nixon?
Right. Well, we know what that says a lot about Nixon. But Hoffa files lawsuits to regain his power and accuses the Nixon administration of conspiring against him. Tensions with the mafia mount, and Hoffa refuses to back down. Here we go. So now you've got beef with the president of the United States. Now you're suing him, and now you're starting stuff with the mafia, the mob.
Sounds like another person that we've been talking about that kind of made more enemies than friends.
This is not going to end well for you, Hoffa. It's not.
No, and I'm pretty sure if I read something right, I think he got some compensation from prison. Right. Take that money, go relax. Like you've got enough. You're old enough that you don't have to do anything.
He probably had his pension from his Teamsters too.
You've taken 2 days off. He had a lot of time off in prison, but up until then he had 2 days off a month.
He probably had enough time to cover it with his PTO time.
Yeah, I mean, he saved decades of vacation. Now go enjoy it. Yeah. Go spend a weekend in that hotel you helped fund.
So here's a quote that was found. It said, quote, "By 1973, Hoffa was a man with too many enemies. He was disrupting the order the mob liked." So the mob actually liked the order that was going on. And here comes Hoffa opening his mouth and challenging everything. And they didn't like that.
The mafia liked to stay low key, and Hoffa was not low key. So Hoffa attempted his final campaign in 1974 and 1975. He traveled the country rallying allies and union members. I'm going to say at that time, he probably put more miles in than Ray Kroc did trying to sell milkshake machines. But that's a different story. If you want to hear about Ray Kroc and his hostile takeover at McDonald's, let us know. Email us at darkdiscoveryspot@gmail.com. It's a fascinating story if you don't know. The mob is nervous. Fitzsimmons is in charge, and Hoffa's return could bring scrutiny. So by the mid-1970s, Hoffa, no longer the big boss of the Teamsters. He served time in prison, famously for jury tampering. And after his release, he was legally barred from union leadership until 1980, which would have made him 71 years old, I think, at that time. Dude, buy a boat, go fishing, retire, do something else. But you don't spend years running the most powerful labor union in America without dreaming a comeback. He wasn't going to quit.
Don't call it a comeback.
He never left. The problem? Hoffa's comeback plans weren't exactly welcomed with open arms by everyone. In fact, a number of mafia figures who had interest in the Teamsters were downright hostile. The man who really stood in Hoffa's way was Anthony Provenzano, or Tony Pro. His friends probably. Anyone who wanted to stay out of his way? Well, not a guy you want to mess with. I butchered that line, but it's okay. That's what you listen to me.
Provenzano was no small fry. He was a Teamsters local leader in New Jersey and had been a national vice president during Hoffa's previous reign. But more importantly, he was a capo regime. That's mob speak for a mid-level boss.
Or capo, as most people know.
In the infamous Genovese crime family in New York City.
Huh, didn't you say to remember that name?
Yep. Now, Tony Pro, I'm going to call him Tony GoPro because I like that. That's pretty funny.
Wish you had a GoPro through all these meetings. We'd know a little bit more.
We would know everything. And Hoffa started off as allies, but things soured big time. They actually shared a cell in federal prison in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania in the 60s. For what? I don't know. We didn't dig into that part of the story. But when Hoffa tried to get Provenzano's support to regain his old job in 1973 and 74, Provenzano turned him down cold. So cold, in fact, that Hoffa was reportedly threatened with violence and kidnappings of grandchildren.
So at the time, the mob, they ran a certain way. No women, no children. They kind of let the family out. You went after the person that you had a vendetta with. So now we're getting into, we're going to threaten your family.
You think you would back off by then?
You would think, but he didn't spend time with his family. So did it really matter to him?
His ego.
Was the union more important than his family? He proved for decades it was.
What's that old saying? Power corrupts absolutely, and absolute power corrupts absolute, or whatever.
Yeah, and these guys aren't afraid to carry through with what they're saying.
Right. So Hoffa in a 1975 interview says, quote, "I built this union with my own two hands. I'm not afraid of anyone. Not Bobby Kennedy, not the mob." Probably not the smartest thing to say in an interview where everybody can hear it, whether it be newspaper, television, anywhere.
So this is where we're going to stop the story for today. Not with a bang, but a mystery that's getting ready to come up. We're going to go over the final day of Jimmy Hoffa and his disappearance. Hoffa's disappearance still remains one of America's greatest unsolved cases. But to understand why he vanished, we must first understand who he really was, which I think we did a pretty good job. He was a builder, a fighter, and a man obsessed with control and unwilling to give it up, no matter the cost. So join us on July 30th, the 50th anniversary of Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance, where we talk about the final day, the aftermath, and the theories that have cast a shadow over Jimmy Hoffa's legacy in American history. This has been Dark Discoveries, where the deeper you dive,
the darker it gets.